After 10 years have passed since alien monsters landed on the American-Mexican frontier, the infected zone in the Middle East is now infested with these creatures. The United States has dispatched its military to combat these monsters, but the indiscriminate bombardment has destroyed tens of thousands of local homes and inspired more insurgents to join the fight against American forces. Sergeant Frieder is presently conducting a sniper mission inside the infected zone. From a tall roof, he meticulously observes 3 Arab men and follows his target with a rifle. Frieder hesitates as the man approaches a Muslim woman carrying a child, but swiftly recovers and kills his target with a single shot. Then he flees quickly, attempting to avoid detection by passing through the crowded market to reach his vehicle. As he exits the city to return to the U.S. base, he observes the condition of the land, where explosions and monster corpses have become commonplace. A group of companions is spending time with their loved ones in Detroit before being sent back to the Middle East. Michael, an orphan, visits his closest relative, Frankie, only to discover that he is occupied with his girlfriend. The 3 of them, including Inkaler, then travel to the hospital where Sean's wife is giving birth. The 4 of them grew up together, and joining the same military unit strengthened their friendship. Sean's wife would like him to remain a little longer, but he needs a diversion before returning to battle. The 4 men spend their final day as civilians playing basketball, smoking, and witnessing a dogfight. The dog's opponent is a baby monster, which makes the combat even more illegal. The dog initially appears to be victorious, but the creature quickly retaliates and kills the dog by overwhelming it. The dog's owner is so enraged that he fires back at the monster. The boys conclude their day at the bar, after which they attend a party filled with drugs, women, and general debauchery. The following day, the party arrives in the Middle East via helicopter, allowing them to witness the devastation of the region. The creatures are enormous and travel in packs, creating a truly terrifying sight. As they approach the desert, the monsters notice the helicopters and attempt to capture them, but luckily, the pilot is quick thinking and flies away just before the area is bombarded. Following that, the helicopters arrive at the base. The soldiers are introduced to Frieder and Sergeant Forrest, who describe the current situation. Their primary objective is to halt insurgent activity in the city, not to eradicate the monsters. After a brief team exercise, the platoon begins city patrol. When the boys venture to the streets, they feel tense because they are surrounded by people who dislike Americans. However, they begin to loosen up when children approach them with an inquisitive nature and request photographs, making it simpler to connect with the locals. The team then reaches what they believe to be a rebel stronghold, where they spend the entire day observing the area and searching for clues on the containers that depart every few hours on trucks. When night descends, the building is searched, but no weapons or explosives are discovered. They do notice 3 enormous creatures approaching, but before they can react, they collide with a farmer who despises the United States military because they claimed they were here to improve the situation, but they actually make it worse. It was American bombing that killed his family and his livestock, and they continue to attempt to expel him. However, the man is adamant to remain because he owns both the farm and the container. He refuses to provide any information about the insurgents because he knows if he does, he will be killed. The farmer continues to scream at them while the monster continues to approach. In a moment of dread, Michael hits the farmer to knock him unconscious. When one of the monsters eventually reaches the farm, the squad opens fire with their shotguns, hitting him multiple times until he falls dead. The remaining 2 enemies are then bombed by the aircraft. After returning to camp, Frieder shouts at them for failing to notice a civilian in time to prevent him from obstructing their path. They were fortunate that it was only a farmer, as he could have been a terrorist. If the team is not vigilant enough, the entire squad will perish. Then the lads retire to rest, and Frieder and Forrest reflect on their youth, stating that they were not as weak as the current generation. Frieder is in a foul mood and continues to drink, so Forrest reminds him that he needs to see his family again because he has been away for too long. This motivates Frieder to contact his wife and daughter, as hearing her voice is the only thing that gives him the strength to continue. The squad receives a new mission after 12 weeks of patrolling. A teammate is stranded in an infectious zone in the desert and has lost all communication. To save them, the squad must travel cautiously through a mine and rebel-infested region. Before departing, they capture a group photo as a memento in case not everyone returns. During the journey, they observe a number of smaller creatures running around, and they are shocked to discover that they will not attack. However, one of the vehicles inadvertently destroys one of the monsters, causing the men to become diverted and run over mine. The explosion severely damages one of the vehicles, and Sean promptly exits, wounded but still alive, only to step on another mine. To make matters worse, the insurgents seize the opportunity to encircle them and begin firing. The team takes shelter behind the car and returns fire while making their way cautiously to their injured teammates. Frieder checks the car and is devastated to discover that Forrest is already dead. While the others drag Sean's body over to check his wounds and discover that he has lost both of his legs. After bandaging Sean as best they can, the team picks him up and runs towards the nearest building while Frieder provides cover. Frieder must shout at the boys to remind them to use their bullets carefully and aim precisely because the boys are so enraged by what has occurred that they begin firing continuously without looking, while the team continues to defend the structure. They attempt to contact the base for assistance, but HQ cannot access their location. Despite Inkler's best efforts to administer medication and staunch the bleeding, Sean has lost too much blood and dies. At that moment, the smaller monsters begin to arrive, and HQ announces that they are dispatching a drone to bomb the area over the radio. The team is devastated by the death of their friend and wants to retrieve the corpse, but Frieder yells at them, stating that it would be futile. Wait, and allowing emotions to interfere will be fatal. The squad reluctantly abandons Sean and flees just before the device detonates. After a few hours of running through the desert, the team discovers an abandoned building and verifies that it is empty before resting while Frieder attempts to re-establish contact with the base. 2 sniper bullets are heard abruptly. Inklar dies instantly, while Frankie sustains an abdominal trauma. As soon as the squad is surrounded by insurgents, Frieder orders them to surrender for their own survival. The insurgents immediately kidnap the squad, covering their features as they transport them to their hideout, where they are tied to chairs in an old room. Michael and Frieder are devastated to learn that the insurgents want them to witness Frankie bleed to death after the bags are removed. Frankie apologizes for his error before passing away, despite the futility of the duo's efforts to keep him alert with encouraging words. Michael's collapse causes his chair to topple, and he passes out after hitting his head. Eventually, night will fall, and monsters will also appear in this region. The majority of the insurgents flee in their vehicles, but 2 of them enter the room and murder the soldiers. Frater takes advantage of the circumstance and fights back immediately, stomping the men's heads to death. Frater then removes the ropes from his wrists by cutting them on a shattered window, seizes the insurgents' firearms, and frees Michael, instructing him to steal the bikes while he clears the building. Michael, however, gives Frankie the opportunity to bid him a respectful farewell before he departs. Hungering for vengeance, he searches the building until he discovers the insurgent leader, at which point he viciously beats him to death with an iron bar. Michael dashes outside after stealing some weapons to discover a massive monster destroying the power lines. Michael is so exhausted and traumatized by all the death that he covers his ears in denial as the monster begins to attack the building. Sounds from inside the building indicate Frater is fighting the insurgents. A few hours later, Michael and Frater are traversing the desert on the stolen insurgent bicycles. Michael reaches a point where he is unable to continue and pauses to fall on the sand, but Frater tells him he is in shock and reminds him they must complete the mission or all the deaths will be in vain. Eventually, the motorcycles run out of gas, forcing the pair to continue on foot. When they reach a rocky area, they discover an abandoned train compartment where they decide to spend the night. They discuss their hometowns and families, and Frederick reveals that he has been in the army for so long that his daughter doesn't recognize him when he returns home. The following day, the duo continues their journey and encounters a massive deceased monster whose tentacles are still twitching. Next to it is a school bus that was destroyed by the bomb that killed the monster, and the two are horrified to discover a number of deceased children inside. While Frater searches for water and sustenance, Michael recognizes that one of the children is still alive and rescues him. Frater observes that the child is in agony and will not survive the journey, so he attempts to execute him with mercy by covering his mouth and nose. However, the child clutches to Michael's hand, which causes Michael to stop Frater. At that instant, a group of locals on horses approaches the area. Michael surrenders by handing the child to a woman, while Frater promptly draws his weapon. Appreciative for having assisted one of their people, the locals transport the soldiers to camp. After washing up in an oasis and observing the child's appropriate care, Frater and Michael join the locals in sharing their food, songs, and even a cigarette. A few monsters can be seen in the distance, but nobody disturbs them. Michael observes the woman leaving camp with a number of lanterns as darkness descends, and he decides to follow her. It comes out that the lanterns are placed around the bus as a memorial for the children who are being removed from the vehicle and given a proper burial. When a monster approaches, the woman sits to observe it, and Michael, following her example, is astonished by the outcome. The monster is there to mourn his deceased sibling by dispersing luminescent spores all over the ground, thereby illuminating the area with gorgeous beams of light. Michael eventually falls asleep on the ground next to the woman, and the following morning they depart without speaking. Meanwhile, Frater observes the child they rescued and begins to lose his sanity when he realizes that the child is also dying, indicating that their efforts were futile. Frater slaps Michael upon his return to camp for flirting with a female while they should have been concentrating on the mission. Then, he drags him to see the boy's body while reminding him that in war, no one gets to be a hero or experience anything. The soldiers then depart the camp to continue their mission. On their way out, they encounter a child holding a can, which he opens to disclose a small monster. Michael takes the can and releases the baby monster, allowing it to bury itself in the dunes. A few hours later, the duo arrives at their mission location, only to discover a bombed-out town. The streets are deserted, but when Michael makes a turn behind a building, he discovers a group of children playing with firearms. Frieder demands to know where they obtained these weapons, and the children lead him to a building where it is disclosed that the team they were tasked with saving has already perished. Frieder loses his temper and threatens the locals, demanding to know who murdered the soldiers after realizing he lost his team for nothing. He is speaking irrationally and disregards the fact that these are civilians and children are watching. Michael is forced to aim his gun at his superior officer after shooting a man, but Frieder refuses to calm down. He wonders why he's even here and turns back toward the civilians, forcing Michael to fire. Frieder collapses to his knees and grabs his head as he does so, unable to cope with the tragedy's immensity. As the bullet wound steadily bleeds out, he decides to go outside. Thus, he will be able to perish while observing a group of monsters in the distant struggle against the approaching explosives. Michael is rescued by one of the helicopters, but he can only rage at the failure of this mission.